I feel like everybody's right and everybody's wrong.
100%. Why is this important? Why are we even going here? He's helped a lot of guys. He's also not had success with a lot of guys.
Come in with a purpose, and they're very intentional with what they do and how they do it.
From the majors to the sandlot, baseball and softball share space in one place. Welcome to the farm system.
So one of the hitters we train has been batting about 330 all year. And you could say, okay, yeah, really good average, all those things, but also at the same time, and also actually 50 points higher than where he's been at ever in his career in college. But also at the same time, you know, while he was hitting a lot of doubles, some of his power numbers have been down. Some of the home run numbers have been down. And, you know, obviously what he's capable of. This guy is gargantuan, bigger than life, but he also, on top of that, right, has some really big power. He could hit balls, you know, I think he hit one ball like 480 feet like earlier in the year. So the power is all there. But also too, you're seeing some lower angles, some lower spin, you know, some of these things starting to pop up as characteristics kind of throughout. Missing some space. The direction was starting to slip a little bit too. Saw some in person. And again, these are things he had been struggling, you know, almost all of his career. And he knew he had an intuition of just being like, hey, like I know I'm hitting pretty good, but I also know there's, you know, again, this isn't my ceiling of what I could be capable of. And so this last week, you know, definitely got to dive into some of the structural things that he'd been going through with his body and some of the, you know, asymmetries that he had been battling, and we kind of going through his routine, what he'd been working on, what he was continuing to define inside of his video, what he was feeling when he was at the plate. And so we basically, you know, we figured out one of these asymmetries that he's really been battling in his pelvis was really forcing him to jump forward on his front side, opening up early. Again, it was causing some spacing. The direction's going to be down to the left, snap hooking some balls. And also too, again, you're not going to get a lot of true flight to the pull side. And some of the things he'd been trying hadn't been working. So finally, too, the other thing is you're battling, when you're in season, you're also battling these limited rest days, especially when you have a team that's traveling quite a bit like them. They're ranked high in the country right now. All these things are happening, right? And he's in the midst of the battle with some of these things. So one of the things that I like to do is when players are in mid-season and we know that there's how we would really go about it would be some bigger changes and you would need some time to like get after some of these things. It doesn't mean that in season you can't do anything about it and you just have to kind of accept your fate, right? What you can do is if you start playing around with some orientation, right? How do we alleviate some of these struggles, right? How do we work around the shapes that you're already kind of creating, what you could do? And for this guy in particular, we sat down. He had an off day. We finally got to hit together and we kind of started walking through, you know, what he was doing and maybe what options we had. So first off, right, gave him some prep work, right? We're getting some prep work, some things that he can go into that's going to kind of battle some of these asymmetries a little bit more, give him a little bit more space behind the ball. He could be able to get him into his back hip a little bit more than he had previously been. This also too, on top of that as well, he immediately, as soon as he stood back up, had way more range in his rear hip. That was also going to help. That's going to compound over time, right? Where we're going to still work on those things. We don't need to wait until the offseason to make any changes, but maybe we can't go about it as aggressively as we'd like to. Then after that, what we ended up doing is after we moved past his prep work, we actually got into some drills that also would start to work on some of these things too as well. And while those, you know, give you some prep, give you some drills you can do on a daily basis. Okay, well, what happens for me today, right? Like if I'm playing today, what's some things that I could do that could really help him? And so he was getting some, I kind of brought him up the story of when Stanton had his MVP year and how he started to close off. And we started talking about why. I started asking him why. Why do you think that he did that? And why do you think that he continued to close off even more and more? And what do you think actually led to some of that success? And so he had already previously too as well. The reason I went this route is I knew that he had previously had some success with closing off his stance a little bit, but also too on the other side of that, especially in this day and age, it's interesting. Even if you have a lot of old school coaches where guys with a closed stance is actually pretty old school, right? Like if you go look back when, you know, back in the day with the old school is they used to close off and hit all the time. And that's something that, you know, throughout time, we're starting to lose a little bit more of that. And also too, it started getting preached. It's a lot easier to teach athletes just to keep their feet on the line and they need to stride straight and all these things. But there's so many more benefits to playing around with orientation, especially when we're struggling with certain things. And so anyways, he tried it his first night. We started doing some drills with it. He really liked it. He started feeling some things. We started getting a little bit more aggressive of like, hey, I know you closed off in the past, but there's some ways, again, we started working through, like, I want it to be a little bit more. This is how I think you could use it to your advantage. This is what I would do when they start to switch up game plan on you. You can expose this for a little while. They start busting you in, then we can go to this. We started game planning all those things, right? We also then started going into, okay, hey, you're going to have some of these conversations with your coaches too. I want them to be in the loop, and they're going to ask, and they're going to notice some of these things too as well. So we talked about through those conversations. I think it's really important, not only for all your coaches to also be in the loop of what's going on, but also for you to be clear with them too as well, as like, hey, how these guys have been getting me out, how they've been spinning me sliders away, how my direction, has been off, and I've been hitting all these balls off the end of the bat, et cetera, right? It's like, if they're going to get me out, they're going to have to get me out in a different way. They're not going to be able to get me out in the same way anymore. And, I'm going to start to make adjustments just to ride along with them. And, I'm going to force them to get me out in a different way and not pitch to my book and not keep continuing to expose me in those other ways. Right. And so, the first day closed off a little bit, got a hit. It was better. But then the last day he really closed off, like some of the things that we talked about. And this gave him, again, a lot more depth behind the ball. It cleaned up his direction. So instead of being, going to his pulled side, it gave him more direction to the middle part of the field. And then he ends up going 4 for 5, homer, double, the shebang, right? All the things. And I think, along with that, right, it's, and it also too, you can also tell now he has more time to wait on the ball. He's not having to commit so early. His barrel's not coming out the ball. He has more room for error. He's got more, adjustability out front, all of those things. He's got more speed deeper in the zone, all these things that would be really beneficial for a hitter that when they're in season. And this is where I emphasize again, is through these developments. So like with athletes, it's like, you don't have to wait. To the end of the season to do anything. But at the same time, you know what? You do have the constraints as a coach and as a player that, I have to work within these confines, right? Maybe I do only have a day. Maybe I only have an hour. Maybe on top of that too, as well, is, we add some things that will build up over time. That won't be necessarily, there's some today fixes, there's some overtime fixes, and also maybe there's some long-term things that I want to do with you that we're not going to be able to necessarily aggressively get. Or again, maybe when you have a little bit more time, like let's say this week, you got a couple more days off than you previously have had. Maybe we can be a little bit more aggressive with it and how we'd go about it. But developing that with hitters and all of a sudden it's not a coincidence that all of a sudden, home run pops up to opposite field. The exit velocities jump up, the angles for the doubles and all those things. Again, also too, being able to hit, that's the most hits he's gotten the entire season. Was that day too as well, right? And stacking those averages up as well, and how that immediately too is over this last weekend, skyrocketed his batting average as well. It's just stacking these hits and stacking these things, but also too, it's going through it, and also all the learning process that you have throughout is, I think some things you can learn from this, right? Is one, I typically try to find something that they've done successfully in their careers. In the past, right? What's something that's worked with them? There's probably a reason why it's worked for them in the past. It doesn't mean that they need to continue to do it or always do it, but there might be certain times when it's really good for them to go to. And then also too, as well with that, right? Is there, what will they connect with? Who is a similar build, similar mover, similar asymmetries, other things that you might be able to connect storylines with in that way as well. The other thing is, again, this all comes back to also knowing your athlete. Like, what's their temperament like? How are they with changes? Where are they at mentally right now? Are they looking to more aggressively make a change, or is they're just looking for, a little Band-Aid in the moment? Are they a guy that doesn't like to change the routine very much? Where are they at with all that? Where are they at with their coaching stats? What year are they? Are they upperclassmen? Are they, are they upperclassmen? Are they, freshie and they're just trying to earn their name on the squad here, right? What is that whole situation like, right? And I think when you do all of that and you put all those things together, you can start to have some of the success that follows along with it, because I do believe that success leaves clues. And these are some of the things that, especially too earlier on in my coaching career, it's not that they were either the wrong moves, but sometimes you can pull the wrong levers at the wrong time, especially with either the athlete or the coaching staff, or maybe it's just wrong timing, all those things, right? That all comes into experience of understanding, almost kind of when I talk about timing, one of the things I pull from this is thinking about it from this way. if you're baking a cake, right? If you add the icing at the wrong time, if you add the wrong ingredient at the wrong time, you don't let it cook long enough, you don't do, all of these things, there's these timing elements, and sequencing, right, is also a part of timing, right? And when I mean sequencing, I don't necessarily mean the actual swing right now. What I'm talking about is the sequencing of when you reveal, when do you say things, and when do you not say things, right? You have a hitter, you got to understand where they're at. You got to know where they're, am I adding clutter or am I creating clarity? Right? Am I being another voice right now? What does that person need? Is they need some grounding right now? Or do I need to give them hope, right? Can I help them with hope and get their eyes focused on something maybe they've lost sight of, or where they've been pulled away from? And these things all kind of come together for this beautiful picture of where we start to see certain results, right? And so now, as you understand and you build some of those things over time, and this is, Eric Cressy said this the other day. I was listening to one of his podcasts that he was talking about, and he was talking about the power of mentorship, right? And he's like, you can do mentorship where you try to do it remotely, right? And the reason he was saying is like, I don't think that really works, because he's like, a lot of people think it's like teaching the X's and O's, like, here, let me just teach you all the X's and O's of how I know how to coach. But you're missing all the other things, right? You're missing the tone. You're missing the when to speak, when to not, right? The mannerisms, the experience you get from just being in the room in tougher situations, how they handle those, how they navigate through different coaching staffs, and what advice is given and when, and all these things, right? And this is the power of mentorship and learning from other people's experiences. Is I've had the blessing of that too as well. There's no way that I'd be where I am, not only as a coach, but also where there's no way I can, which is really the heart of this, is there's no way I can help a lot of the athletes that I'm able to help now without having some really key mentors in my life that really poured into me, big as well. Right. And, and I think this is the other thing too, as well. And this is where I think a mentor is really a blessing when I look at this from God's, from a God perspective or faith perspective, is I really feel like for someone to really mentor you, they have to pick you. You can't really pick them. Hey, I want you to mentor me. It's like, yeah, but if you want them fully invested, man, and I'll tell you by experience too, is like people that I've invested into and poured into and all those other things as well. If they have a heart and God's given in some way, and their story matches up with yours and why they want to help you and what they're going to work through, and that relationship is very different of what that can be created and what can be cultivated and through that relationship. And I couldn't agree with Cressy enough in this area, right? Is that I think you having in-person mentors in your life that you see regularly, that you guys talk, you get, again, they've achieved things that you would like to achieve. They have, and also too, that doesn't always have to mean too, everybody always thinks about that professionally, but also too, maybe who they are as a man in the sense, or, again, maybe how she has such a art to how she speaks and how she handles, some of these trickier situations, or I really like just his stewardship of, or how steadfast he is in his faith, or, all these things that could be really powerful, I think, as a coach. And, I think more than anything, another thing is as well, it's like being around people that are not only creative, but inspiring, and being around, people that think different, that are willing to challenge certain norms, or to explore things in certain areas that other people haven't really explored in the past. And I think, again, a lot of this can lead to, you should be taking pieces from everybody in all of these different experiences and what that can do for you as a coach. I think, again, it just be so powerful. But in any case, I really think, Dom, in the same way, made some really good adjustments. We'll see how those things, last throughout the season. We'll see also too, on top of that, right? Maybe this is the unlock that really, does some things going forward. I'll keep you guys updated. But I think that, some of these stories and what's going on like behind the scenes, I think a lot of people don't, they miss these a lot of the time, right? They just see the outcomes. They see the people having success. They don't know that there's so much thought. There is so much working it, right? And working and stacking bricks and figuring things out and figuring out which ways not to go and what isn't going to work. All these things that could be very powerful for you and an athlete. And, I think that these things, this is really what happens behind the scenes that leads to a lot of this, success on the field.